Welcome to the Deep Dive. Really glad you could join us today. We're going to be exploring some fascinating developments out of India. We're looking at a snapshot from Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. Think of it as India's daily pulse. It's this mix of stories, high-stakes cricket, geopolitical moves, economic shifts, and some really pressing domestic issues, too. A lot going on.
It really is. And looking at these headlines together, well, that's where you start seeing the patterns, right? Connecting the dots. It gives you a much richer picture of a nation that's just constantly evolving. Our goal today really is to find those key insights, those aha moments
Yeah.
that help you understand what's really happening beneath the surface.
Exactly. We want to, unpack these headlines, get beyond the surface level, bring in the context, look at the implications, and keep you asking that key question. So what does this all actually mean? For you listening, and, well, for the bigger global picture that India is increasingly shaping.
That's the idea. Moving beyond just reporting the news to understanding its significance, getting you thinking about the complex forces driving these events. Because they're not isolated, are they? They all weave together somehow.
Definitely. So let's dive right in. We can start by looking at India's its international interactions. The first few headlines really highlight that. We're talking geopolitics and international economic engagements. And first up is headline 4. India-China talks highlight thaw in ties, push for de-escalation and trade cooperation. Now, this is pretty big. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar just visited China. First time in 6 years for an Indian foreign minister.
6 years is a long time in diplomacy.
It really is. And this comes after that 2023 resolution of the 5-year military standoff in eastern Ladakh. He met with Wang Yi, his counterpart. So this talk of a thaw in ties, what does that genuinely signal, especially after all that tension, those border clashes we saw?
Well, it's significant that both sides publicly acknowledged good progress. That was the phrase used. Progress since the disengagement back in October, and also since the Modi-Xi meeting at the BRICS summit in Kazan. Jaishankar was quite explicit. He said, peace and tranquility at the frontier is the, quote, foundation for mutual strategic trust.
Okay, peace is the foundation. But how strong is that foundation, really, after years of friction and military buildups?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? It raises an important point about durability. Is this a fundamental shift, or is it more pragmatic? A recognition from both sides that, look, constant conflict just isn't sustainable. The cost economically, geopolitically, it's just too high for both of them. So this thaw might be less about a sudden friendship and more about a tactical recalculation, a need to manage things better.
That makes sense, a strategic recalculation. And it wasn't just about the border, was it? Jaishankar's core message seemed quite clear. Differences should not become disputes. Competition should not escalate into conflict.
Exactly. That's a pretty direct way of setting expectations, or at least aspirations. And beyond the border, they did get into specifics on trade. India raised concerns, apparently, urging China to ease up on export controls that are hitting India's domestic manufacturing, and a general call to avoid, restrictive trade practices.
Which is always a point of discussion, given the trade imbalance.
Always. But interestingly, they also talked about people-to-people exchanges, getting those flowing again. Things like direct flights, more travel opportunities. And one specific, quite symbolic point mentioned was resuming the Kailash Manasarovar Yatra.
The pilgrimage.
Yeah.
That had been stopped for 5 years.
That's right, 5 years. So resuming that's not just symbolic, it's tangible. It directly impacts ordinary people, devotees.
Right. So for those individuals, what's the immediate benefit? Does it signal more than just easier travel?
Oh, absolutely. For thousands of pilgrims, it's a deeply spiritual journey they couldn't undertake. So its return means a lot personally. It perhaps signals less border hostility, allows those cultural and religious connections to start mending. But, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this renewed dialogue between the two Asian giants, what does it mean for regional stability? Global power dynamics. Is it a real shift or just, as we said, a pragmatic pause?
Still lots of questions there.
Definitely. And they touched on other cooperation points, too. India asked for hydrological data sharing again on those shared rivers, which is vital. And India reaffirmed support for China's SKO presidency, emphasizing that zero-tolerance stance on terrorism extremism, the core SKO mandates. So it's this complex mix. Cooperation on some fronts, managing competition on others, underlying rivalry still there, probably.
Okay, that sets the stage nicely. Now let's shift slightly to another key relationship, India and the U.S. Headline 6. Congress voices caution over India-U.S. trade talks amid think tank warnings. So the Congress Party is raising some alarms about the ongoing trade talks with the U.S. They're worried about unfair compromises, maybe a lack of caution. Jaram Ramesh, the spokesperson, even coined this term, masala.
Masalal, yes. Mutually agreed settlements achieved through leveraged arm twisting.
Leveraged arm twisting. Wow. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Why the caution? Why warn against eagerness to strengthen ties with the U.S. on trade? What's the implication of masal? Is it about a perceived power imbalance?
Well, Ramesh's term is pointed. He's cleverly referencing masala bonds, right? Those rupee-denominated bonds issued outside India. The implication, I think, is that just like those bonds give external players some financial leverage, this trade deal could maybe create a situation where U.S. pressure disproportionately influences India's choices. On trade, on finance, the fear seems to be that India, in its keenness for a deal, might give away too much, might concede things that aren't in its long-term strategic interests.
I see. So it's a way of highlighting potential risks, using a term people might recognize.
Precisely. It crystallizes that apprehension about, power dynamics in these big international negotiations.
And it's not just the opposition party. A think tank, the Global Trade Research Institute, GTRI, is also advising caution.
Yes, GTRI, based in New Delhi, they're saying basically don't fast-track this. They point to the unpredictability of U.S. foreign policy, different administrations, different priorities. They specifically mention the Trump era. And they warn against making deals under pressure or, duress.
So their argument is prioritize strategic sovereignty, economic balance, over just getting a deal done quickly.
Exactly. That's the core of it. And this really shines a light on the internal debate in India. The government sees this deal as crucial for deeper economic ties, for investment, for market access, vital for growth. But the opposition and groups like GTRI are saying, hold on, let's be transparent, let's think long-term, let's make sure this really benefits India without giving up too much.
So how might this pushback from both political opposition and think tanks actually influence the government? Could it change how they approach future deals, maybe globally?
That's a really important question. It highlights the balancing act for emerging powers like India. You want growth, you want integration into global markets, but you also have to protect national interests, domestic industries, avoid getting, pushed around, this kind of public scrutiny, this debate. It could definitely lead to more demands for transparency in negotiations, maybe a more measured pace. The government can't just ignore this kind of pressure. It might genuinely shift how they calculate the risks and benefits in future economic partnerships.
Okay, from the complexities of trade deals, let's zoom into a very specific, high-stakes financial situation. Headline 9. Jane Street deposits 567 Nevermers to regain access to Indian market amid manipulation probe. This is a huge number. Jane Street, the big U.S. high-frequency trading firm.
HFT.
Right, HFT. They've put $567 million in escrow, basically following orders from SEBI, India's market regulator. And the goal is to get back into the Indian market after being barred over these market manipulation allegations. Let's unpack this. What exactly are they accused of doing? Manipulating the Bank Nifty index. And how does HFT fit in?
So high-frequency trading, as you know, uses super-fast computers, complex algorithms, executing tons of orders in fractions of a second. SEBI's allegation here is specific. They claim Jane Street used these aggressive HFT tactics to artificially inflate the Bank Nifty index level in the morning, the alleged goal, to then profit from short positions they held on index options later in the day when the index presumably corrected.
So pump it up briefly to bet against it falling back.
That's the accusation, essentially, creating an artificial peak to profit from the decline. Now, Jane Street strongly denies this. They argue their trading was just basic arbitrage.
Arbitrage, meaning profiting from tiny price differences across markets.
Exactly, like buying low in one place and selling slightly higher somewhere else simultaneously, a standard, legitimate strategy. So what's fascinating here is that very fine line between incredibly sophisticated, aggressive, but legitimate trading and alleged manipulation. Where does one cross over into the other, especially in the HFT world where everything happens at lightning speed? It's a huge challenge for regulators like SEBI.
It really must be. So Jane Street makes this massive deposit, calls it a good faith gesture, but they're planning to fight SEBI's findings. And crucially, they won't resume options trading, which is apparently their main game in India, until this is sorted out.
Right, and that exposure in equity derivatives, you mentioned it's apparently 5 to 7 times larger than their cash stock holdings in India. That shows how deeply involved they are in that derivatives market.
Wow. And SEBI's investigation has been going for 2 years.
Yeah.
And might even expand.
That's what's reported. 2 years already, possibly looking at other indexes, other exchanges. It suggests SEBI is taking this very seriously. You also saw the market reaction. BSE shares actually went up slightly on hopes Jane Street might return, boosting liquidity, shows their market impact.
Interesting. But this is all happening against a backdrop of concern about retail investors losing money in derivatives, right? Something like $12.3 billion last fiscal year.
That's the staggering figure reported, yes. It puts this case in a broader context. India's equity derivative market is massive, accounts for, 60% of global volume now? So this Jane Street case isn't just about one firm. It touches on market integrity, retail protection, and the regulation of these incredibly complex, high-volume trading strategies, especially involving foreign players.
So what are the wider implications here for the stability, the integrity of India's financial markets, especially regarding foreign firms participating? This feels like a test case.
It really does. It raises a critical question about how SEBI's final decision will shape the rules going forward. If they find against Jane Street, uphold the manipulation charges, it could signal a much stricter environment for HFT, maybe deter some foreign firms, or at least make them much more cautious. If Jane Street wins their appeal, well, that might force SEBI to refine its definitions, its approach to regulating these strategies. Either outcome will significantly impact investor confidence, the perception of regulatory oversight, and really the future direction of India's capital markets. It's about defining fair play in this super fast, globalized financial world.
Okay, from finance, let's make a smooth turn towards the automotive sector. Electric vehicles, specifically. Headline 10. Tesla's long-awaited India debut marks a major milestone for EV market. So it finally happened. Tesla officially launched in India on July 15th, starting with the Model Y SUV. And they opened their first showroom in Mumbai's Bandra Kurla complex, BKC, very upscale area.
BKC, prime real estate.
Exactly. So why is this considered such a major milestone, a tectonic shift even, for India's car market? What's the big deal here?
Well, the location choice itself, BKC, is really telling. It's not just any commercial area. It's where sovereign wealth funds, big international banks operate. Choosing that spot signals Tesla isn't just, selling cars. They're positioning themselves right at the heart of India's premium business world, targeting those affluent urban buyers. It suggests a deep commitment, an integration strategy. It's about establishing a significant presence in India's EV landscape, which is, as we know, evolving really quickly.
So it's more than just opening a shop. It's a statement of intent.
Absolutely. And what's perhaps fascinating here is how Tesla's entry acts as a kind of validation. It signals to the world that India is a serious, viable market for high-end EVs that could attract more global players, more investment, and it might also, spur faster development of charging infrastructure, maybe even local manufacturing down the line. It raises the whole game.
Right. The showroom itself, 4,000 square feet in Maker Maxity. Sleek design, I imagine. And the Model Y is the first offering, aiming for that sweet spot performance tech, but priced for the upper middle class, luxury segment in India.
Yeah, hitting that target market. And the timing is good, right? There's growing interest in clean mobility in India. Government policies are becoming more supportive. EV infrastructure is slowly expanding.
Definitely. So analysts are watching the impact, not just on car sales, but maybe ripple effects, like on real estate in areas like BKC.
Potentially, yes. Premium retail space demand, maybe even influencing urban planning decisions down the road if EV adoption accelerates. And this Mumbai showroom, it's almost certainly just the beginning. They'll be looking at other major cities, expanding their footprint. It suggests a long-term play.
So thinking about the Indian consumer, what expectations might Tesla reset? How does their presence change things for people looking to buy an EV?
Well, Tesla brings a certain brand cachet, right? High-tech image, performance focus. That can push consumer expectations higher. People might start demanding more range, better tech integration, maybe a more seamless charging experience from all manufacturers. Looking at the bigger picture, their presence could genuinely speed up India's shift to sustainable transport, push local companies to innovate faster.
But it won't be easy for them either, right? What are the unique challenges they might face in India?
Oh, definitely challenges. Pricing is a big one, especially with India's import duties, unless they move to local manufacturing quickly. Building out a reliable, widespread service network across a country as vast and varied as India, that's a huge logistical task. And localization adapting features, maybe even battery tech for Indian conditions and consumer preferences, that'll be absolutely key for long-term success. It's a major strategic move, yes, but the road ahead has plenty of potential bumps.
Okay, Let's shift focus now. We're moving into our second main section, looking at domestic law, order, and governance challenges. This brings us inside India, looking at some really tough issues states are grappling with. We'll start with headline 3. Wave of violence in Bihar and Bengal casts shadow over elections. This sounds alarming. A series of high-profile murders in both Bihar and West Bengal, sparking real concerns about law and order, especially with elections coming up in those states. Let's unpack this. What's the pattern here, and why this apparent spike in violence before elections?
Well, this raises that very difficult question about the nexus, the connection between politics, crime, and governance. The pattern seems to be targeted killings, often political figures or people with business influence. That strongly suggests it's not random street crime. And the timing, just before elections, well, that's often when things escalate because local power, political control, it can be deeply tied to economic interests, sometimes illicit ones.
So the violence is potentially a tool to influence things.
It certainly can be used that way. What's perhaps crucial here isn't just that it shakes public confidence, which it absolutely does. It's that these very public, targeted killings, they might be aimed at intimidating rivals, yes, but also at fundamentally realigning local power structures right before the vote. It's a way to try and, solidify control, potentially formalizing that link between crime and politics in a way that's rarely acknowledged openly. It undermines faith in the whole democratic process.
And the specifics from Bihar, they're quite stark. Union Minister Chirag Paswan getting a death threat on Instagram. That's investigated now.
Yes. And then the killing of Gopal Khemka, a BJP leader and businessman in Patna, shot near his home. Police are calling it a contract killing linked to a land dispute. They've made arrests, reportedly found evidence.
And it wasn't just him. Surendra Prasad, another former BJP figure, gunned down in his field in Sheikhpura.
And that followed others, a school administrator, a sand trader, a shopkeeper, all shot dead within about 10 days around Patna. The sheer concentration of these incidents, it's understandably led to major investigations. Forensic teams, special units involved.
And the political fallout is immediate. Tejaswi Yadav from the RJD blaming leaders for ignoring lawlessness. Rahul Gandhi calling Bihar India's crime capital.
Yeah, it becomes political ammunition very quickly. And West Bengal is seeing similar, deeply troubling events. 3 Trinamool Congress leaders killed in just 4 days. Piyush Ghosh in Birbhum, Rajah Khan in South 24 Parganas, Abul Kalam Azad in Malda hacked to death on his birthday.
It's just relentless. The parallels between the two states are worrying.
They are. And security has reportedly been beefed up in volatile areas in both the states as a result. This whole trend really underscores that growing political and criminal unrest. It casts a very dark shadow as election season heats up. Public safety becomes a paramount concern.
How does this actually influence voters, do you think? Does this kind of violence change how people might vote, or even if they vote?
Right.
It must create fear.
It absolutely can. Looking at the bigger picture, the long-term consequences for governance, for democracy, in states where politics and crime seem so tangled, they're severe. Voters might become disillusioned, stay away from the polls. Or they might swing towards parties promising a strong hand, promising law and order above all else. It risks creating this cycle where, criminal influence potentially grows within the political system, further eroding public trust. And it makes politics incredibly dangerous for those involved.
A very sobering situation. Let's switch tracks slightly, but stay within that theme of domestic law and order. Headline 2. Maharashtra steps up crackdown on illegal beef trade. The Maharashtra government is reaffirming its push against illegal beef and cattle smuggling. This came up in the state's legislative council. So what's the context here? Why is this a significant issue in Maharashtra? What makes the trade illegal and what's driving it?
Right. The illegal part comes down to Maharashtra's specific laws. They have the Maharashtra Animal Preservation Act, amended back in '95. That act essentially bans the slaughter of cows, bulls, and bullocks within the state. Plus, there's the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. So illegality often refers to slaughtering these protected animals or transporting their meat without proper permits or using false documentation.
Okay, so it's rooted in state law protecting certain cattle.
Primarily, yes. And what seems notable here is the government's multi-pronged approach. It's framed partly as animal protection, but also very much as cracking down on illicit trade networks. These networks often involve falsified papers, bypassing health checks, which also raises public health concerns, not just animal welfare issues.
And there was a big seizure mentioned back in March, near Pune.
Yes, March 24th. 2 containers carrying a huge amount, 54,000 kilograms of suspected buffalo meat. It apparently came from Hyderabad's port, heading for export out of Mumbai. The key issue was the paperwork, or lack thereof. The exporting company allegedly faked documents, mislabeled the shipment, called it Indian halal frozen boneless buffalo offals
Why mislabel it like that?
to bypass the mandatory quarantine and clearance rules for actual meat exports, presumably.
Yeah.
Cut corners, save time or money, avoid scrutiny. Pune's forensic science lab later confirmed it was boneless buffalo meat prepared for export, so it points to deliberate deception.
And the scale of this. The government registered over 1,200 cases just in the first half of 2025. Seized over 1,700 tons of meat.
Those are the reported figures, yeah. It suggests this is a pretty widespread issue they're trying to tackle. Enforcement is being intensified, bringing in the animal husbandry department, police, transport authorities, doing more inspections, revoking permits for repeat offenders. They're talking a zero-tolerance policy.
Beyond law enforcement, what are the broader impacts? Societally, economically, maybe even culturally. This feels like it touches on a lot of sensitive areas.
It really does. And that raises the question about the challenges of enforcing these kinds of laws. In a state like Maharashtra, you have diverse communities. For some, cattle are sacred. For others, the meat trade, particularly buffalo meat, which isn't banned for slaughter like cows, is a major livelihood. And for many, it's part of their diet. So a widespread crackdown inevitably impacts jobs, disrupts supply chains. It can potentially push parts of the trade further underground. Balancing these economic realities with the legal restrictions and the deeply held cultural or religious sensitivities, it's an incredibly difficult tightrope for the government to walk. And it has implications for India's buffalo meat exports, too, where the country is a major global player.
Very complex. Now let's turn to a tragic story with potentially huge ramifications for safety oversight. Headline 7. Air India crash investigation examines pilot's mental health history. Investigators looking into that horrific June 12th Air India crash. The London-bound Dreamliner that went down in Ahmedabad. 241 on board killed, 19 on the ground.
Just devastating.
Truly. The focus is now reportedly shifted to the pilot's medical records. Captain Sumit Sabharwal. It reports he had faced depression, mental health challenges. This feels incredibly sensitive. Why does a pilot's mental health become such a central point in a major crash probe? What does it suggest about safety protocols?
It's profoundly sensitive, yes, but also absolutely critical in aviation. The responsibility pilots carry is immense. Their mental state is integral to flight safety. When this becomes a focus, it immediately implies questions about whether existing safety protocols, screenings, monitoring, reporting mechanisms are robust enough. Are there gaps? What's particularly concerning and fascinating in a grim way here is the apparent contradiction. Captain Sabharwal, 56 years old, highly experienced, over 15,000 flight hours. But reports say he took multiple leaves recently for mental health, for bereavement, like after his mother passed away in 2022. And an aviation safety expert, Mohan Ranganathan, apparently confirmed that other Air India pilots had raised concerns about his mental state.
Concerns were raised by colleagues, but he was cleared to fly.
That's the crux of it. Despite these reported concerns, he had a medical exam in September 2024. Air India's medical team cleared him to return to duty. That raises very serious questions about the thoroughness, the effectiveness of those medical checks, and the clearance process. How are those concerns factored in, if at all?
His records are with the investigators now. Air India's parent, Tata Group, says the preliminary crash report didn't show alarming findings related to him, though.
Right, and the initial technical finding mentioned was about the engine fuel cutoff switch being flipped just moments after takeoff. The reason why is still unclear. The investigation by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is ongoing. They have the black boxes.
So, still piecing it together, Air India's CEO criticized sensational media coverage, which is understandable given the sensitivity.
Yes, wanting the investigation to run its course. But the human cost was immense. That neighborhood, the medical college impacted. Though miraculously, one passenger, a British national, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, survived. The Pilots Association defended the crew's training adherence, but inevitably, this tragedy forces a hard look at pilot wellness.
What are the challenges for airlines here? How do they manage pilot wellness effectively? Balancing privacy against public safety seems incredibly tough.
It's a huge challenge. This raises the important question of how this tragedy might spur changes, possibly globally. Airlines have to respect privacy, absolutely. But public safety is paramount. Reducing the stigma around mental health is key, so pilots feel safe seeking help without fearing it ends their career. This could lead to renewed scrutiny worldwide, potentially new standards for more continuous mental health monitoring, better support systems for flight crews. It's not just about finding fault in one instance, it's about strengthening the entire system's resilience and fostering a culture where mental well-being is prioritized in these high-stress jobs.
A critical issue indeed. Okay, let's move into our final section now. Sports, culture, and political maneuvering. This really shows the diversity of life in India, beyond the headlines we've just discussed. And we kick off with some cricket. Headline 1, England clinch third test against India at Lord's. A big win for England. They beat India by 22 runs on a nail-biting final day at Lord's. Puts them 2-1 up in the 5-match series. India needed 193 to win, bowled out for 170. Let's unpack this. What made it so gripping, such a close finish?
Classic Test cricket drama. What really stood out was the momentum shifting back and forth constantly. That's what Test matches can do so well. England's bowlers just kept applying relentless pressure. That was absolutely key on that final day. They seemed to use the conditions really well, a deteriorating pitch, which typically helps spinners and makes batting tougher as the match goes on.
Right, the pitch breaking up.
Exactly. And they combine that with really smart, disciplined field placements, squeezing the runs, building pressure. The final moment, spinner Shoaib Bashir getting that last wicket, Mohammad Siraj, that just summed up England's resilience, their tactical sharpness under pressure, their nerve held.
And India. They had moments, apparently, moments of promise, but the batting just faltered under sustained aggression.
Yeah, chasing a target like 193, you'd think they'd back themselves, but they couldn't build partnerships. Wickets kept falling, especially in that final session. It just collapsed. This loss definitely put a spotlight on vulnerabilities in India's middle order and raised questions about their strategy when the pressure was really on.
So, a tough loss for India, but a big boost for England under Ben Stokes' captaincy.
Oh, definitely. Stokes' leadership, his tactical approach, it really seems to have revitalized this England side. You see that impact. And apparently there were some heated exchanges between players, too, added to the drama.
Yes. Shubman Gill apparently admitted it heightened the excitement. Bit of spice in the middle.
Always adds to the spectacle. So with 2 tests left, the series is beautifully poised, promises more intrigue. Both teams can play brilliantly. But England held their nerve this time. That win at Lord's, it could be pivotal psychologically.
So how does India bounce back from that? Such a close loss. Series on the line, it must sting.
It surely does. And this raises that important question about the psychological impact. How do you regroup? India needs to quickly figure out those middle-order issues, maybe tweak their tactics for pressure situations. For England, it's about keeping that momentum, avoiding complacency after a big win. Both teams will be doing a lot of thinking, a lot of planning before the 4th test. It might just make India more determined, you know? Sometimes a close loss fuels the fire even more.
Could well do. Okay, from the cricket ground to the movie set, this next one is huge. Headline 8. Ramayana set to become India's most expensive film at 4,000 crore. 4,000 crore rupees. That's roughly $500 million US. An absolutely massive budget for an Indian film.
Monumental, unprecedented, really.
Producer Namit Malhotra is behind this, a 2-part epic adaptation of the Ramayana, Ranbir Kapoor as Lord Ram. Big names involved: Yash, Amitabh Bachchan, Sai Pallavi, Sunny Deol.
Quite the star cast.
It really is. So this budget, $500 million, here's where it gets really interesting. What does this signal about the ambition, the direction of Indian cinema?
Well, Namit Malhotra himself is key here. His background: CEO of Prime Focus, the VFX giant. He's worked on huge Hollywood films, Inception and Interstellar, Dune. He knows global scale. And he made a point of saying this is entirely self-financed. Quote, "We're not taking anybody's money."
Wow. So no external studio pressure, potentially?
That seems to be the implication. It signals incredible confidence, immense ambition from within the Indian industry itself to tell arguably India's greatest epic story on a scale that rivals Hollywood. It's a statement about competing globally, not just in storytelling, but in production value, in spectacle, and maybe using this cultural epic to project India's soft power differently.
That's fascinating. His inspiration apparently came from watching Jurassic Park as a kid, wanting to create that kind of immersive, culturally specific blockbuster.
Yeah, he spoke about repositioning Indian cinema globally, not as, quote, victims, but as heroes of timeless epics.
Okay.
The director is Nitesh Tiwari. He did Bengal, Chichor. Known for quality filmmaking, so the promise is cutting-edge visuals, yes, but also emotional depth, a massive spectacle.
And they're saying it could rival Hollywood tentpoles, but still cost less? That's ambitious.
It is. And the casting details add to the hype. Sunny Deol as Lord Hanuman, apparently getting a 15-minute action-packed appearance. That'll draw crowds. The first part is aiming for Diwali 2026 release. positioning it as a huge cultural event, a potential box office game changer both in India and internationally.
So can it do it? Can Ramayana redefine how Indian mythology is seen globally? Prove India can tell its biggest stories with this kind of scale.
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, the cultural, artistic, economic ripple effects could be immense if it succeeds. For the Indian film industry, it could set a whole new benchmark, inspire more big-budget, globally minded projects, and for India's soft power. Imagine a visually stunning, emotional, powerful Ramayana reaching audiences worldwide who might not know the story. It could dramatically boost India's cultural influence, showcase its storytelling power like never before. It's more than just a movie, it's a cultural and strategic statement.
Incredible ambition. Okay, shifting from culture back to politics now. Headline 5. Amit Shah's Kerala visit aims to bolster BJP ahead of 2026 polls. Union Home Minister Amit Shah visited Kerala recently, July 12th, a strategic visit clearly aimed at strengthening the BJP's position before the 2026 state elections there. So what's the significance here, Kerala? Traditionally, it's LDF versus UDF, the left, and the Congress-led front. Why is it such a key target for the BJP, and what's their strategy?
Yeah, Kerala's been a tough state for the BJP. What's fascinating here is their relentless effort to carve out space to establish a solid third front in that bipolar political landscape. Despite national dominance, they've struggled to make major inroads there. So Shah's visit, timed like this, signals they're not giving up. They're playing the long game. His itinerary looks carefully crafted to energize their base and try to broaden their appeal, multiple angles of attack, so to speak.
Right, let's look at that itinerary. He inaugurated a new BJP state headquarters in Thiruvananthapuram. Symbolic consolidating infrastructure.
Shows permanence, commitment.
Then he addressed a big gathering, the Viksit Kerala Sammelan, positioning the BJP as a development-oriented alternative.
Trying to shift the narrative away from just ideology towards governance and progress.
And then, interestingly, he visited the Sri Rajarajeshwara temple in Kannur, engaging with the state's spiritual cultural side.
Exactly. That temple visit is significant. It connects with cultural and religious sentiments, a strategy the BJP uses effectively elsewhere. So it's this combination, building the party machine, talking development, and making those cultural, spiritual connections, trying to appeal on multiple levels.
And there was a message of central government support, too, wasn't there? Mention of flood relief funds.
Yes. The center had recently released funds to flood-affected states, including over 150 crore rupees for Kerala. Shah apparently reaffirmed that commitment, framing it as the Modi government supporting states in crisis. It's a way to show tangible benefits of aligning with the center, perhaps appeal to voters feeling let down by the state government during emergencies, builds that narrative of national solidarity led by the BJP.
But can these high-profile visits, these strategies, actually translate into votes in a state with such a distinct political history, such strong existing loyalties?
That's the $1,000,000 or maybe billion rupee question, isn't it? It raises that broader point about political shifts in states that have historically resisted the BJP. How effective is this mix infrastructure, development talk, cultural outreach, central funds in a place like Kerala? It's still unclear. High-profile visits boost morale, get headlines. But turning that into seats against entrenched political machines, that needs deep, sustained grassroots work. Perhaps the BJP isn't expecting a sudden takeover in 2026. Maybe the strategy is more about incremental gains, disrupting the LDF-UDF dynamic, positioning themselves as the main opposition eventually. It's a long-term investment.
Makes sense. Playing the long game. Okay, one final headline for today, bringing us back to the international stage, but with a cultural twist. Headline 11. India protests Toronto Rath Yatra disruption. Calls for Canadian action. India has formally protested to Canada. This happened after devotees in a Rath Yatra procession in Toronto were apparently targeted. Someone allegedly threw eggs at them from a building. Let's unpack this. Rath Yatra, the chariot festival. What's its significance, and why is this incident seen as particularly regrettable by India?
Rath Yatra is a really important ancient Hindu festival, primarily associated with Lord Jagannath in Puri, Odisha, but celebrated by diaspora communities globally. It involves pulling deities on large chariots in a public procession, symbolizes unity, inclusivity, harmony. It's a major cultural and religious event. So an incident like this, throwing eggs, is seen as deeply disrespectful. An attack not just on individuals, but on a sacred procession, on religious freedom, on the cultural identity of the diaspora.
So it's more than just minor vandalism.
Absolutely. What's often fascinating, or perhaps troubling, is how something like throwing eggs, which might seem minor in isolation, can escalate into a diplomatic issue. When it targets a sensitive religious event, it's perceived as hate-motivated, as profound disrespect. It touches on those raw nerves about community relations, religious tolerance.
And this got attention online.
Yeah.
A video shared on Instagram.
Yes, an Indo-Canadian woman, Samna Bajaj, shared a video. It sparked widespread condemnation. Naveen Patnaik, Odisha's former CM, expressed anguish, highlighting the emotional impact on ODS worldwide when devotees of Lord Jagannath are targeted like this.
India's response was quick. The Ministry of External Affairs called it regrettable, urged Canada to take action, protect religious rights.
Yeah, MEA spokesperson Radhir Jaiswal specifically said it undermines the spirit of Rath Yatra, which is about harmony. India is demanding Canadian authorities find the perpetrators, hold them accountable, reiterating their stance against hate-driven disruptions.
And this comes at a time when India-Canada relations have been, well, a bit tense recently over other diaspora issues.
Exactly. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It adds another layer to those existing tensions around diaspora affairs integration issues. So it's more than just an isolated incident. The MEA emphasized will keep pushing for respectful treatment of Indian communities abroad. Defending religious freedom is a key part of that.
Given those recent frictions, how might this egg-throwing incident, seemingly small, further strain things? What are the implications for the Indian diaspora in Canada?
Well, this really raises that important question about the need for better international cooperation on safeguarding cultural events, ensuring diverse communities feel safe and respected. Incidents like this, targeting religious symbols, they can deepen diplomatic strains. They can also create a sense of unease, even alienation within diaspora communities, regardless of how integrated they feel. It puts pressure on host countries like Canada to show they're serious about protecting all residents, combating hate. It might require more direct dialogue between India and Canada to manage these tensions, because these seemingly small acts, if they keep happening, they can erode trust and complicate the bigger relationship.
What a range of stories we've covered today. A really insightful deep dive into India's daily pulse from July 15th. From the drama of Lords to complex diplomacy with China and the U.S., the intricacies of finance with Jane Street, those tough domestic challenges in Bihar, Maharashtra, and cultural moments like the Ramayana film and the Rath Yatra issue, it really shows the dynamic, sometimes contradictory energy of it all.
It absolutely does. And seeing them together, you start to get that richer, more nuanced picture, right? Understanding India's internal priorities, its global role, it all connects. It really drives home how valuable it is to look beyond the single headline, to see the context, the multiple perspectives.
Definitely. So as India keeps rising, juggling these deep domestic issues with its global ambitions, what's our takeaway as listeners? What responsibility do we have to understand this complexity? And what do these individual events hint about the future for the world's largest democracy?
That's the thought to leave with, perhaps. Connecting it all to the bigger picture. In this age of nonstop information, the real deep dive isn't just knowing the facts. It's about questioning, synthesizing, understanding the why behind the what's. Think about how these threads, geopolitics, finance, society, culture, are weaving together, not just in India, but everywhere. What connections will you look for next in today's global pulse?